So what is or should be the role of the government when a nation, a society, suffers so mightily? President Hoover was hesitant to help those struggling with unemployment. His background taught him that hard work could overcome any difficulty. The problem was that men could not find jobs at which to work hard. Hoover based his hesitancy on two main reasons. First, he believed that government programs to aid the unemployed would simply create a government bureaucracy that was too large and unwieldy. Remember, Hoover favored a laissez-faire approach. He assumed that since society had created the wealth of the 1920s, it could do so again. Secondly, and perhaps more importantly, Hoover believed that by giving a man a handout, his desire to work would be destroyed. He passed programs to feed starving horses, but would not allocate food for starving humans. To show their derision with Hoover, homeless people nicknamed the towns of tents and shacks hastily thrown together as Hoovervilles.
This rare home movie footage shows the real Hoover, a man who preferred fishing with his granddaughters to the trappings of wealth and power. Nevertheless, his humanitarian fame and progressive politics put him in demand. In 1928, he was the overwhelming choice to succeed Calvin Coolidge in the White House. Hoover assumed the office, but not the $75,000 a year salary.
He never took one dime, one red cent as president. He turned it all back in the Treasury because he had money.
So that was a little look on Hoover's personal life. When President Hoover did act, his actions had disastrous effects. He raised import taxes, hoping to generate more income. The tax increase actually had the reverse effect because European countries raised the taxes of American imports. Trade between Europe and the U.S. virtually stopped. Hoover supported several public works programs, the largest of which was the Boulder Dam project on the Colorado River. It's also known as Hoover Dam. More than 800 public buildings and 37,000 miles of highway were constructed. Overall, he approved more than $800 million in public work projects. It was, however, too little too late. Finally, Hoover created the Reconstruction Finance Corporation, RFC, to lend money to banks, railroad companies, insurance companies, and other enterprises. The Great Depression was also tough for farmers. Why bother farming vegetables and grain if there's no one to buy it? A lack of buyers was the horrible reality of the life of a farmer in the 1930s. While the residents of urban areas suffered greatly during the Depression, economic hardship was not limited to them. A whole different set of problems plagued those citizens of the rural areas of the country. Three major problems beset these farmers. First, the overseas markets that had provided so much income during World War I had dried up during the 1920s and into the early parts of the 30s. As the overseas markets struggled to get their own economies moving forward, they stopped buying from the U.S. Second, a small beetle called the boll weevil was destroying crops, particularly the cotton crop of the South. An effective insecticide had not been developed, so farmers struggled to compete with this destructive pest. Finally, generations of single crop farming had depleted the soil of vital nutrients. What farmers had once thought was an endless supply of nutrients and fertile soil had become useless. However, the greatest concern of most farmers was not these farm problems. Instead, it was the Dust Bowl. In the summer of 1931, the rain stopped. A circular area covering parts of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico had become known as the Dust Bowl. In 1932, there were 14 dust storms recorded. In 1933, there were 38 dust storms. Poor plowing techniques brought about by the invention and use of the tractor, drought and overgrazing of farm animals, caused much of the topsoil to be blown away during the early 1930s. By 1934, 100 million acres of cropland had lost most or all of its topsoil. Here's a map of the most severely affected area. Although the effects of the drought could be felt from Canada to Mexico, the worst area was made up of Texas, Oklahoma, Kansas, Colorado, and New Mexico. Dust storms were called black blizzards. The worst of the storms came on April 14th, 1935. It was known as Black Sunday. The storm was clocked at 60 miles per hour. Houses were buried to the tops of the windows by drifts of dust. People had to dig their way out of their houses and dig their cars out of dust piled up to the roof. People died from dust pneumonia as dust infected their lungs. People coughed up clods of dirt as big around as a pencil and 3 to 4 inches long. Now, at the same time, members in Washington were reluctant to hear about the dust storms and the reality. All truly seemed lost. No crops, no rain, sick lungs. What were farmers to do? Well, John McCarty of Texas formed the Last Man's Club to encourage people to stay and continue to hold out. Hugh Bennett, founder of the Soil Conservation Service, encouraged farmers to try new farming techniques to conserve the soil. A movie titled The Plow That Broke the Plains was made to show farmers what had been done wrong and how to correct it. While Bennett was addressing Congress, trying to convince them of the need of this program, a dust storm from the plains hit Washington, D.C. and left a half-inch of dirt all throughout the Capitol building. Well, Capitol, outside the Capitol. As things got worse, many families simply had to give up and head west. These people became known as Okies. Their trip was long, difficult, and dangerous because they had to cross mountains and deserts in makeshift old trucks, with the whole family and everything they owned packed in and on them. California had been billed as the Promised Land. To get to California, the Okies traveled the famous road Route 66. John Steinbeck's famous novel, The Grapes of Wrath, chronicles the struggles of families who had lost their farms as they traveled through the Dust Bowl and deserts to search for jobs. The Grapes of Wrath is on the reading list. Look at this map of Route 66. As you can see, it covered 8 states of plains, rivers, deserts, and mountains. Although the trip along this famous stretch of America highway offered some hope to people, it's anything but a vacation. There are many songs, poems, and artwork available about this famous highway. An unexpected reaction awaited many Okies when they reached the West Coast. California did not want them. And those who did manage to make it to California found that life there was no better. They owned no land and worked as pickers for large farms, earning as little as $1 a day. Barely enough to keep them alive. When the job was finished, the farmers chased them off the land.